The woman who'd sent it for him took one look at his wheelchair and said the cruelest words Caleb Wade had ever heard. "I asked for a husband, not a burden. Get that cripple away from me." She rode away without looking back, leaving him stranded at the station in the scorching Arizona heat with nothing but shame and a town full of witnesses. But rejection ain't always the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning. Stay with me until the very end of this journey. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Because what happened next in Dusty Creek changed everything. The train lurched to a stop, and Caleb Wade gripped the wheels of his chair hard enough to turn his knuckles white. 4 years. 4 years since the Silver King mine collapse in Nevada. 4 years of learning to live without the legs that had carried him through 30 years of life. 4 years of doors closing in his face. Jobs disappearing the moment employers saw the chairwomen turning away with pity or disgust in their eyes. But today was supposed to be different. Dusty Creek Station, last stop before the territorial line. Caleb checked the brake on his wheelchair, his own design modified and reinforced with mechanisms he'd forged himself. The chair was the one thing he could count on. It never pitied him. It never looked away. It just worked. "Need help getting down, mister?" The conductor appeared in the aisle, already reaching for Caleb's worn leather bag. "Just the bag. I can manage the rest." The conductor's face did that thing faces always did, a flicker of uncertainty smoothed over with professional courtesy. "Yes, sir. Platform's hot as blazes out there. Mind yourself." Caleb had learned not to finish those sentences for people. It never helped. The heat hit him first when the door opened. Arizona summer. The kind that baked the moisture from your skin before you could even feel yourself sweating. July in the territories didn't care about your plans or your pride. The railroad had installed a ramp at this station Caleb had written ahead to confirm. He descended with the smooth efficiency of long practice, his wheels rolling onto the wooden platform, with a sound that made several heads turn. He saw her immediately. Miranda Ashworth stood near a wagon at the far end of the platform, watching the train with the focused anticipation of someone waiting for something specific. She wore an expensive traveling dress despite the heat, and her face had the kind of handsomeness that came from strong bones and stronger will. Her eyes found him the moment his chair cleared the ramp. Caleb wheeled toward her, his heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. He'd sold everything to afford the train ticket. The advertisement in the Denver Post had been simple: widow seeks capable husband for ranch partnership. Must be skilled, sober, God-fearing. He'd written 3 drafts before sending his letter. In the final version, he'd mentioned almost casually that he used a wheeled chair for mobility, but found it no hindrance to skilled labor. Her response had come 6 weeks later. Short, businesslike. Arrival acceptable. July 14th. Will meet train. He'd allowed himself to hope. That was his first mistake. "Mrs. Ashworth?" He stopped his chair 6 feet away. "I'm Caleb Wade, from Denver." She stared at him. The silence stretched out like a rope pulled tight. "Your letter," she said finally, her voice flat. "You said you used a wheeled chair." "Yes, ma'am." "You didn't say you couldn't walk at all." "I apologize if that wasn't clear. I can assure you." "Assure me of what?" Her voice rose and heads turned across the platform. "I run a working ranch, Mr. Wade, 1,200 acres, 60 head of cattle, horses that need breaking, fences that need riding. I need a partner who can work from dawn until dark." "I understand the requirements, ma'am. I have references." "References." She laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "What good are references when you can't even stand?" The words hung in the hot air between them. Several people on the platform had stopped pretending not to listen. Caleb could feel their attention like additional heat on his face. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said carefully, "I've worked in mines, sawmills, and machine shops. I can repair any equipment you've got. I can read engineering diagrams and keep account books. My chair doesn't change what my hands can do." Your chair changes everything." She stepped back, her face hardening into something cold and final. "I need a husband, Mr. Wade. A man capable of running a ranch and standing beside me in church. I need someone whole." The word hit him like a physical blow. Whole. "I see," he said quietly. "I should have been more specific in my requirements." She pulled a small leather purse from her reticule. "I'll pay your return ticket to Denver. It's only fair." "That won't be necessary. Mr. Wade, surely you can't intend to stay in Dusty Creek. There's nothing here for—" She gestured at his chair. "For someone in your situation." Your situation. As if being in a wheelchair was something that had happened to him yesterday, and not something he'd lived with, worked with, built a life around for 4 years. "I'll find something," he said. "Let me at least give you money for the journey." She held out several bills. "I feel terrible about this misunderstanding." "No." The firmness in his voice made her hand stop. For just a moment something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or the first crack in her certainty. "Very well." She tucked the money away. "I wish you luck, Mr. Wade. I truly do." She turned and walked toward her wagon, where a tall ranch hand in a worn hat stood waiting. Caleb watched them speak briefly. Watched the ranch hand glance back at him with something like contempt. Watched Miranda Ashworth climb onto the wagon seat and drive away without another look. The crowd on the platform began to disperse. A few people glanced at Caleb as they passed, some with sympathy, some with the careful blankness that was worse than sympathy. "Hell of a thing!" The voice came from behind him. Caleb turned to see an older man in a shopkeeper's apron, arms crossed, shaking his head. "Miranda Ashworth's cold as ice, but I ain't never seen her be that cruel in public." The man's eyes traveled over Caleb's chair with undisguised assessment. "You really came all this way for a mail order situation in your condition." "I came for honest work and a fresh start." "Fresh start?" The shopkeeper snorted. "Mister, you picked the wrong town. Dusty Creek ain't got much use for folks who can't pull their weight." "I can pull my weight just fine." "Sure you can." The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. "Name's Lloyd Kincaid. I run the general store. You need supplies, you come to me, assuming you got money to pay." He looked at Caleb's worn clothes, his single bag. "Which I'm guessing you don't." Caleb met the man's eyes and saw something familiar there. Not just dismissal, but enjoyment. Lloyd Kincaid was the kind of man who liked seeing others brought low. "I'll manage, Mr. Kincaid. We'll see about that." Lloyd turned and walked away, his boots loud on the wooden platform. The train whistle blew. Final call. Caleb sat very still, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair. He could get back on. Could go back to Denver, back to the boarding house where the landlady charged him extra for the ground floor room, back to the machine shops where they'd hire him for a few weeks before finding reasons to let him go. Or he could stay here in this furnace of a town where he'd just been publicly rejected before he'd even had a chance to prove himself. The train began to move. Caleb turned his chair away and wheeled himself toward the ramp that led down to the street level. His bag sat on the platform where the conductor had left it. He retrieved it, hung it from the back of his chair, and began the search for somewhere to stay. The boarding house was easy to find. It was the only one in town. A narrow 2-story building with Rhea's house painted on a weathered sign. The front steps were impossible. 5 risers, no ramp, no handrail wide enough to be useful. Caleb wheeled around to the back, navigating through an alley that smelled of garbage and horse manure. He found a service entrance at ground level, though he had to push aside empty crates to reach it. He knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened to reveal a small woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back severely. Her face was weathered by sun and time, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "No beggars," she said immediately. "I'm not begging. I need a room. I can pay." She looked at him, at his chair, at his bag, at his face. Her expression gave away exactly nothing. "How long?" "Don't know yet. At least a few days. $1 a day. Includes breakfast. No cooking in rooms, no drinking, no women. She paused. Payment in advance. I can give you 3 days now. Need to find work before I can commit to more. 3 days. She held out her hand, palm up. Caleb counted out $3 from his rapidly dwindling money. She pocketed it without counting, then stepped aside. Ground floor room and back. Only one I got that's accessible. She said the word like she'd learned it specifically for this moment. Follow me. The boarding house was clean, but worn everything functional. Nothing decorative. The room she led him to was barely larger than a closet. A narrow bed, a small table, one chair with a broken slat. Privy's out back, washrooms down the hall. Breakfast is 6:30. You late, you don't eat. Understood. Thank you, Mrs. Reyes. Elena Reyes. She paused in the doorway, studying him with that sharp gaze. That woman at the station, the one who left you there. She was stupid. Caleb looked up, surprised. Stupid to judge a man by his legs. Mrs. Reyes continued. When I came to this country, people judged me for my face, my language, my blood. Told me I was less. I proved them wrong every day for 30 years. She tapped the doorframe with one knuckle. You prove them wrong too. Or don't. Your choice. She left, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Caleb sat alone in the tiny room as the afternoon heat pressed in through the single window. He could hear the sounds of the town outside, horses' wagons, voices calling in English and Spanish. The normal sounds of normal lives being lived by normal people. He transferred from his chair to the bed, which creaked but held. Then he lay back and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Whole. That's what Miranda Ashworth had demanded. Someone whole. As if he'd left part of himself buried in that Nevada mineshaft. As if the legs he'd lost had taken his value with them. He closed his eyes and remembered the collapse. He'd been 29 years old, strong as an ox. He'd had a girl back then, Sarah, with auburn hair and a laugh that made you want to hear it again. They'd talked about marriage, about buying land, about futures. Then the support beam gave way in Tunnel 6, and Caleb had woken up a week later in a hospital bed, with a doctor telling him very carefully that they'd done everything they could. Sarah had visited once. She'd cried, held his hand, told him she was sorry. She'd married someone else 6 months later. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Yeah. The door opened to reveal a young man, maybe 20, with dark hair and an easy smile. He carried a tray with a bowl of beans, a chunk of bread, and a cup of water. Mrs. Reyes said to bring this. You missed supper, but she figured. He shrugged. Anyway, here. Thank you. I'm Caleb. I know. Everyone knows. The young man set down the tray. I'm Miguel. I help out around here. Anything heavy you need moved, just ask. I appreciate that. Miguel hesitated in the doorway. Hey, I saw what happened at the station, with Mrs. Ashworth. That was... He shook his head. Man, that was rough. Word travels fast. It's a small town. Everybody knows everything by sunset. Miguel shifted his weight. For what it's worth, Miranda Ashworth's been running that ranch alone since her husband died. She's hard as nails and twice as sharp. But she's also scared. Ranch that size, no man to help. She's been losing ground for 2 years. That doesn't excuse what she said. No, it don't. I'm just saying she made a bad choice out of fear, and now she's stuck with it. Miguel grinned. Anyway, welcome to Dusty Creek. It ain't much, but it's got potential. You'll see. After Miguel left, Caleb ate the beans and thought about potential. About second chances. About the possibility that maybe being rejected wasn't always the end of the story. The next morning, Caleb woke before dawn and made his way to the dining room where 4 other boarders were already gathered around a long table. Conversation stopped when he wheeled in. He found a spot at the end where his chair fit without blocking the aisle. Coffee. Mrs. Reyes appeared with a pot. She didn't wait for an answer before filling his cup. Eggs and tortillas. Eat fast. Kitchen closes in 20 minutes. The other boarders returned to their conversations. Talk of freight schedules, the price of cattle, the heat that showed no signs of breaking. One man, a salesman by the look of his clothes, kept glancing at Caleb between bites. "You're the fellow from yesterday," he finally said. "The one Miranda Ashworth left standing." "Well," he glanced at the chair. "You know what I mean." "I know what you mean. Hell of a thing coming all this way in your condition. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I'm a skilled tradesman looking for honest work." Caleb kept his voice level. "Same as anybody else." "But surely you knew." "I knew I could do the work. Still can." The salesman opened his mouth to respond, but Mrs. Reyes appeared beside the table and refilled his coffee cup with enough force to splash some onto the table. "You finished eating, Mr. Harris?" Her voice could have frozen the July heat. "Because some of us have work to do." The salesman muttered something and returned to his eggs. After breakfast, Caleb wheeled out into the morning heat and made his way down the main street. He needed to find work, and he needed to find it fast. 3 days of boarding money wouldn't last long. The town was already busy, wagons hauling freight riders on horseback, women in bonnets moving between shops. Most people stepped aside when they saw him coming. A few stared openly. One small boy pointed until his mother pulled him away. Caleb ignored them all. He'd been stared at for 4 years. It didn't hurt anymore. Not much anyway. He found the blacksmith shop on 2nd Street, a low building radiating heat, even in the already brutal morning sun. The ring of hammer on anvil carried clear and sharp. The smith was a big man, maybe 50, with arms like tree trunks, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same iron he worked. He glanced up when Caleb wheeled through the open doorway. "Help you?" "I'm looking for work. Heard you might have some mechanical repairs that need doing." The smith set down his hammer. "Where'd you hear that?" "Didn't hear it anywhere specific. Just figured a town this size, there's always machinery breaking down. Pumps, wagon brakes, mining equipment. Things that need someone who knows mechanics." "And you know mechanics?" "I do. Spent 8 years in the Nevada silver mines before." Caleb gestured at his chair. "Worked on every piece of equipment they had. Steam engines, hoisting systems, ore crushers. I can fix anything that moves." The smith studied him for a long moment. His expression gave away nothing. "Name's Hiram Stone," he said finally. "Been doing the smithin' here for 20 years. You're right that folks bring me mechanical work sometimes. Things I ain't got the touch for." He gestured toward the back of the shop. "Got a freight wagon back there with a brake that sticks. Can't figure out why. You think you can fix it?" "I'd need to look at it first. Can't promise anything until I understand the problem." Hiram nodded slowly. "Fair answer. Most men would have promised the moon to get hired." "Most men lie. I don't." Something shifted in Hiram's expression. Respect, maybe, or at least the beginning of it. "Go take a look. Tools are in the box by the wall. You fix it, I'll pay you $2. You can't fix it, no harm done." Caleb wheeled over to the wagon and examined the brake mechanism. It was a standard design lever system with a friction pad pressing against the wheel hub. The problem was obvious. Within 30 seconds, the pivot point was corroded, binding up when pressure was applied. He spent the next 2 hours disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling the mechanism. He replaced the corroded pin with a new one from Hiram's supplies, trued the lever arm that had gotten bent, and applied graphite powder instead of oil to prevent future binding. Hiram tested the brake when he finished. Smooth as butter. "How'd you know to use graphite?" Hiram asked, working the lever again. "Oil attracts moisture. Moisture causes rust. Graphite doesn't freeze, doesn't attract water, lasts longer." Caleb wiped his hands on a rag. "Should work fine now, unless the temperature drops below -20. And if it does break, failure's probably the least of your problems." Hiram laughed, a short, surprised sound. "You're all right, Wade. Here's your $2. He counted out the money. "I got more work if you want it. Things pile up that I ain't got time for. Pays not much, maybe $8 a week, but it's steady. I'll take it." Good. Start tomorrow 7 o'clock. And Wade? Hiram met his eyes. Folks around here might not give you a fair shake at first. Some of them won't ever. But the ones who matter, they'll judge you by your work. Just keep showing up. Caleb left the smithy with $2 in his pocket and the first real hope he'd felt since stepping off that train. $8 a week wasn't much, but combined with side work, it might be enough. He was halfway down the street when a voice stopped him. Well, well, the cripple found himself a job. Lloyd Kincaid stood in front of his general store, arms crossed, that same ugly smile on his face. Heard Hiram Stone took you on. Bad business decision if you ask me. Who's going to want their equipment fixed by someone who can't even walk? Caleb kept his voice level. I appreciate your concern for Mr. Stone's business, but I've got work to do. Work. Lloyd's smile widened. You know what I think? I think you should have got back on that train yesterday. I think you're going to be nothing but trouble for this town. And I think... Pardon me. The voice came from behind Lloyd, a woman's voice sharp and clear. You're blocking the boardwalk, Lloyd. Some of us have actual business to conduct. Lloyd turned, his expression shifting to something Caleb couldn't quite read. Susannah, didn't see you there. Obviously. She stepped around Lloyd and came into Caleb's view. She was maybe 30, with dark hair escaping from beneath a faded bonnet and a face that might have been pretty if it hadn't been so tired. Her dress was worn but clean, and she carried a basket of folded laundry on her hip. Her eyes met Caleb's, and something passed between them. Recognition maybe of one person who'd been judged unfairly seeing another. You're the man from the station yesterday, she said. The one Miranda Ashworth left stranded. Yes, ma'am. My name's Susannah Cole. I run the laundry and dress shop on 4th Street. She shifted the basket on her hip. Heard you're good with machinery. I like to think so. I've got a sewing machine that's been giving me trouble for months. Industrial model, foot-powered. Needle keeps jamming and I can't figure out why. She glanced at Lloyd, then back at Caleb. If you can fix it, I'll pay fair wages. $2, same as Hiram. I'd need to look at it first. That's what you said to Hiram Stone. He told me. The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Seems like a reasonable policy. Come by my shop when you've got time. 4th Street can't miss it. She walked away without waiting for an answer, leaving Caleb and Lloyd standing in awkward silence. Lloyd's expression had gone sour. Stay away from her, Wade. Excuse me. Susannah Cole. She's trouble. Got ideas above her station. A woman running a business alone, no husband, no family. Lloyd's voice dropped. There's talk about her. Things that ain't proper. Seems to me a woman running her own business is exactly what this territory needs. Lloyd's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know this town, don't know its people. You're an outsider, a cripple, and a fool. He stepped closer. Take my advice. Get on the next train out. This ain't the place for you. I'll keep that in mind, Caleb said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got work to do. He wheeled past Lloyd, feeling the man's glare on his back like a target between his shoulder blades. He found Susannah's shop on 4th Street that afternoon, a narrow building with Cole's laundry and dressmaking painted on the window. The front had steps, but he spotted a ramp leading to a side entrance, rough-built but functional. Susannah was inside, bent over a heavy cast-iron sewing machine that had clearly seen better days. She looked up when he wheeled in. That was fast. Figured I'd take a look while I had time. All right. She stepped back from the machine. It's a Singer Model 12. Had it for 6 years, worked fine until about 3 months ago. Now the needle jams every few stitches and I can't figure out why. Caleb wheeled closer and examined the mechanism. The problem revealed itself within seconds, a small metal burr on the needle plate, invisible unless you knew where to look. You got a file, he asked. Small one for fine work. In the drawer there. He retrieved the file and spent 5 minutes carefully removing the burr, then tested the machine. It ran smooth and clean. Susannah stared at the machine, then at him. "That took you 5 minutes." "The fix took 5 minutes. Finding the problem, that's what took skill." "How much do I owe you?" "We said $2. She pulled the money from her apron pocket and handed it over. But she didn't let go immediately, and Caleb found himself looking up into eyes that held something he couldn't quite name. "Lloyd Kincaid warned me about you," she said quietly. "Did he?" "Said you were trouble. Said I should stay away." Her jaw tightened. "Lloyd Kincaid's been warning people about me for 3 years. Says I'm improper running a business alone. Says I've got ideas above my station." "He said something similar to me." "I'm sure he did." She released the money. "Mr. Wade, I don't care what people say about you. I don't care about your chair or your legs or whatever happened to put you in that situation. I care about whether you can do the work you're hired to do. That's all I ask." "Good." She paused. "I've got other things that need fixing around here. Shelving that's coming loose, a door that won't latch. If you're interested in more work, I'm interested in paying for it." "I'm interested." She nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "Then we understand each other." Caleb left the shop with $4 in his pocket, more money than he'd had when he arrived, and the beginning of something he hadn't expected to find. Not just work, not just acceptance, possibility. The sun was setting as he wheeled back toward Mrs. Reyes's boarding house, painting the Arizona sky in shades of red and gold. The heat was finally breaking, replaced by the relative cool of desert evening. He'd been rejected less than 24 hours ago, left stranded at a train station by a woman who'd looked at him and seen nothing but his chair. But he'd also found work, found allies, found the beginning of a life. Miranda Ashworth had called him incomplete, unworthy, less than whole. She was wrong. Caleb Wade wasn't broken. He wasn't useless. He wasn't half a man. He was exactly who he'd always been, someone who could build, create, fix, and fight. Someone who refused to let other people's judgments define his worth. The chair didn't change that. Nothing could change that. He just had to prove it. One day at a time, one piece of work at a time, one person at a time. Starting tomorrow. 3 weeks passed, and Caleb Wade learned the rhythms of Dusty Creek. He worked at Hiram's smithy every morning, taking on the mechanical repairs that piled up from ranchers and miners across the territory. Afternoons he made his rounds, fixing what needed fixing, building what needed building, proving, with every piece of work, that his chair didn't define his worth. Susannah Cole became a regular stop. "The shelving's coming loose again," she said one afternoon, gesturing at the wall behind her counter. "Third time this month." Caleb examined the brackets. "Problem's not the shelving. Problem's the wall. Wood's rotting from moisture. You've got a leak somewhere. Can you fix it?" "I can reinforce it, but you need someone to find that leak or you'll keep having this problem." Susannah sighed. "Add it to the list of things I can't afford." "I could take a look. No charge." She studied him with those tired, sharp eyes. "Why?" "Because you gave me work when I needed it. Because I'd rather fix a problem right than patch it wrong." He paused. "And because Lloyd Kincaid would love to see your business fail. I'd rather not give him the satisfaction." Something shifted in her expression. "You've noticed that." "Hard not to. He watches your shop like a hawk watching a rabbit." "Lloyd's been watching me for 3 years." Her voice went flat. "Ever since I refused to sell him this building. He wants your shop. He wants everything on this block. Been buying up properties, squeezing out small owners. My husband bought this building outright before he died. No mortgage, no loans. Lloyd can't touch it unless I sell." Her jaw tightened. "I won't sell." "Good." She looked at him sharply. "You don't even know what he's offering." "Doesn't matter. A woman who won't be pushed around by men like Lloyd Kincaid, that's worth more than any price." For a moment, Susannah said nothing. Then, "You're different, Caleb Wade." "Different how?" "Most men look at me and see a problem to solve. A widow who needs rescuing, a woman who doesn't know her place." She crossed her arms. "You don't look at me like that. Because you're not a problem. You're a person. Running a business, making your own way. That's not something to fix. That's something to respect." The silence stretched between them, charged with something neither of them named. "The leak's probably in the back corner," Susannah said finally. "That's where the moisture's worst. I'll check it tomorrow." "Thank you, Caleb." He left the shop with something new lodged in his chest. Not hope exactly, something quieter. Something that felt like the beginning of understanding. The next evening, Caleb was working late at Hiram's smithy when the door banged open. "Wade." Lloyd Kincaid stood in the doorway, two men flanking him. "We need to talk." Caleb set down his tools. "I'm listening." "You've been spending a lot of time with Susannah Cole." "I've been doing repair work for her, same as half the town." "Don't play stupid with me, cripple." Lloyd stepped closer. "I've seen you going in and out of that shop. Seen the way she looks at you. People are talking." "People always talk." "They're talking about improper relations, about a widow and a cripple carrying on behind closed doors." Lloyd's smile was ugly. "That kind of talk can ruin a woman's reputation, ruin her business." Caleb felt his hands tighten on his wheels. "You spreading those rumors, Lloyd?" "Me, I'm just a concerned citizen. But I'm thinking maybe you should find work somewhere else. Keep away from decent women, before things get complicated." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. Free advice." Lloyd leaned down until his face was inches from Caleb's. "Take it or don't. But remember, this is my town. I decide who belongs here and who doesn't. And you, Wade, you don't belong." He straightened up and walked out, his men following. Hiram appeared from the back of the shop, hammer still in hand. "Heard all that. He's trying to scare me off." "Is it working?" Caleb looked at the door where Lloyd had disappeared. "What do you know about him?" "Lloyd Kincaid." Hiram set down his hammer. "Came to Dusty Creek about 10 years ago with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever it took to get ahead. Built his store into the biggest in the territory. Made himself indispensable." "How?" "By being the only supplier. By buying out competitors or running them off. By extending credit to farmers and ranchers, then calling in debts when they couldn't pay." Hiram's expression darkened. "Half the small operations in this valley owe Lloyd money. He's got them by the throat." "And Susannah?" "Susannah's the one that got away. Her husband was smart, paid cash for everything, never took credit. When he died, Lloyd expected her to fold. Expected her to come crawling to him for help." Hiram shook his head. "She didn't. Kept the business going on her own. Made Lloyd look like a fool. So this is revenge. This is Lloyd Kincaid not being able to stand that a woman beat him." Hiram met Caleb's eyes. "Be careful, Wade. Lloyd don't fight fair. And he don't forget." The next morning, Caleb found Susannah standing outside her shop, staring at the front window. Someone had painted a word across the glass in red letters, "Whore." "When did this happen?" Caleb asked. "Sometime last night." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I found it when I came to open up." "Lloyd." "Can't prove it." She finally looked at him and he saw something fierce in her eyes. "He wants me to be scared. Wants me to know he can get to me whenever he wants." "Are you scared?" "I'm furious." She grabbed a bucket and rag from inside the shop. "Help me clean this off." They worked side by side in the early morning heat, scrubbing away the ugly word, while the town woke up around them. A few people walked past, some averting their eyes, others staring openly. One woman stopped. Molly O'Brien, young red-haired with a face that suggested she'd seen too much hardship for her years. "Mrs. Cole." Molly's voice was quiet. "I saw who did this. Susannah straightened up. Who? Carson Reed, Mrs. Ashworth's ranch hand. He was in town last night drinking at the saloon. I saw him heading this way around midnight with a paint bucket. You're sure? I'm sure. Molly glanced nervously down the street. But I can't testify to it. Lloyd Kincaid holds my father's debt. If he finds out I talked... I understand. Susannah touched the younger woman's arm. Thank you for telling me. Molly hurried away and Susannah turned to Caleb with fire in her eyes. Carson Reed works for Miranda Ashworth. And Miranda Ashworth hates me almost as much as Lloyd does. Why? Because my husband was supposed to marry her. Susannah wrung out the rag with more force than necessary. 20 years ago, before I came to Dusty Creek, Miranda Ashworth was engaged to James Cole. Then he met me, broke the engagement, and married me instead. She never forgave either of us. And now Lloyd's got her ranch hand doing his dirty work. They're working together. They have been for years. Susannah threw the rag into the bucket. Lloyd wants my business. Miranda wants to see me humiliated. Together they can make my life hell. Not if we stop them. She looked at him. Caleb, this isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. He wheeled closer. Lloyd Kincaid threatened me yesterday. Told me to stay away from you or face consequences. Miranda Ashworth rejected me at that train station and called me less than whole. They've both made it clear what they think of me. His voice hardened. I didn't come to Dusty Creek to hide from bullies, and I'm not going to stand by while they destroy a good woman's life. Susannah stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. All right. We fight together. Said. They started gathering evidence that same day. Mrs. Reyes was their first ally. When Caleb told her what had happened, her face went cold with anger. Lloyd Kincaid, she said, is a snake who thinks he's a king. I've watched him destroy good people for 10 years. Watched him lie, cheat, steal, and smile while doing it. She pulled a wooden box from beneath her counter. I keep records. Every transaction, every payment. 3 years of proof that he overcharges, that his scales are wrong, that his accounts don't add up. Why haven't you reported him? To who? The sheriff? Mrs. Reyes laughed bitterly. Sheriff Morrison owes Lloyd money, same as everyone else. The territorial judge comes through twice a year and doesn't stay long enough to care. She pushed the box toward Caleb. But if someone were building a case, a real case with evidence that couldn't be ignored, these records might help. Thank you, Elena. Don't thank me yet. Lloyd has eyes everywhere. If he finds out what you're doing, he'll come for you hard. Let him come. Hiram Stone added his voice next. I've got receipts going back 5 years, he said, pulling a stack of papers from his desk. Every time Lloyd shorted me on supplies, every time his measurements didn't match what I ordered. Never made a fuss about it because it wasn't worth the trouble. But if you're putting together proof of his crooked dealing, here it is. You're willing to testify. I'm willing to tell the truth. That's all testifying is. Deputy Sam Tucker found Caleb at the smithy that afternoon, a young man maybe 25 with a badge that looked too heavy for his shoulders. Mr. Wade. Tucker shifted nervously. I heard you're asking questions about Lloyd Kincaid. I am. You should stop. Why? Because Lloyd's got friends, powerful friends, and they don't like people poking around in his business. Are you one of those friends? Deputy. Tucker's face flushed. No, but I'm also not stupid enough to go up against him without backup. Sheriff Morrison won't help you. He's in Lloyd's pocket so deep he can't see daylight. The deputy glanced around, then lowered his voice. But there's a territorial auditor coming through next month. Name's Harrison. Got a reputation for being honest. If you had evidence, real evidence, he might be willing to listen. Why are you telling me this? Because my sister borrowed money from Lloyd 2 years ago. Couldn't pay it back. He took her property, her savings, everything she had. She's working as a seamstress in Tucson now, barely getting by. Tucker's jaw tightened. Lloyd Kincaid ruins lives. Someone needs to stop him. Someone will. By the end of the week, Caleb had a small stack of evidence receipts. Records, sworn statements from people willing to tell the truth about Lloyd's dealings. It wasn't enough for a conviction, but it was enough to make trouble. Then Lloyd made his move. Caleb was eating supper at Mrs. Reyes's boarding house when Miguel burst through the door. "Caleb, you need to come quick. Lloyd's at Susannah's shop. He's got papers, says she owes him money. Sheriff's there too." Caleb didn't wait to hear more. He wheeled through the streets as fast as his arms could move, his heart pounding with every rotation of the wheels. He found a crowd gathered in front of the laundry. Lloyd stood on the boardwalk, a leather folder in his hands, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. $47 in unpaid debt, according to my records. Mrs. Cole has refused to pay, despite multiple requests. I've been patient, but a businessman can only be so understanding. That's a lie. Susannah's voice was fierce but strained. I've never bought anything on credit from you. I pay cash for everything. My ledger says otherwise. Lloyd held up the folder. I have detailed records of every purchase, every payment, every outstanding balance. Your signature is on the account, Mrs. Cole. Are you saying my records are false? I'm saying I never signed anything. Those records are forged. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward, his expression weary. Mrs. Cole, without proof that you paid the laws, got to side with the documented evidence. This is robbery, legal robbery. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. If you can't pay the debt by end of business tomorrow, Mr. Kincaid has the right to file a claim on your property. Caleb pushed through the crowd. Sheriff. Morrison turned, his eyes narrowing when he saw the wheelchair. This don't concern you, Wade. It concerns everyone when a man uses forged documents to steal a woman's livelihood. Caleb wheeled forward until he was level with Lloyd. Let me see those records. This is a private business matter. If it's so private, why are you conducting it in the middle of the street? Caleb held out his hand. Show me the ledger. Lloyd's face reddened, but with the whole town watching, he couldn't refuse without looking guilty. He thrust the folder at Caleb. Caleb examined the pages carefully. The handwriting was neat. The entries detailed the signatures at the bottom clear. But something was wrong. These dates, Caleb said slowly. According to this, Susannah made purchases on June 15th of last year. That's correct. June 15th was a Sunday. Your store is closed on Sundays. The crowd stirred. Lloyd's face went from red to white. That must be a clerical error. And this purchase here dated March 3rd. You've listed 3 bolts of cotton fabric. Caleb looked at Susannah. You use cotton fabric in your business? Never. I work with wool and linen. Cotton's too light for the garments I make. Caleb turned back to Lloyd. Seems like a lot of errors for such detailed records. Now see here. I also notice there's no receipt numbers on these entries. Strange, since every legitimate business keeps receipt copies for their customers. Caleb closed the folder. I think these records are about as genuine as a $3 bill. You're calling me a liar. Lloyd's voice shook with rage. I'm saying your evidence doesn't hold up to basic scrutiny, and I'm saying any honest judge would see through this scheme in about 10 seconds. Sheriff Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Kincaid, maybe we should... This cripple doesn't know what he's talking about. Lloyd snatched the folder back. He's been sniffing around Susannah Cole for weeks. Everyone's seen it. He's not interested in justice. He's interested in protecting his whore. The word cracked through the air like a gunshot. Susannah stepped forward, her face pale but her voice steady. Lloyd Kincaid, you've been harassing me for 3 years. You've vandalized my property. You've spread lies about my character, and now you're trying to steal my business with forged documents. I never... Carson Reed painted that word on my window last week. I have a witness who saw him do it, and everyone knows Carson does your dirty work and Miranda Ashworth's. Susannah's voice rose. You think because I'm a woman alone, you can push me around? You think because Caleb uses a wheelchair, he doesn't matter? She stepped closer to Lloyd, and to his credit or his shame, he stepped back. We're not afraid of you. And we're not going to let you destroy us. This town has seen what you are, and when the territorial auditor comes through next month, he's going to see it too." Lloyd's face twisted. "You'll regret this. Both of you." "Probably." Susannah's voice was ice. "But I'd rather regret fighting than regret surrendering." Lloyd turned and stalked away, Sheriff Morrison trailing uncertainly behind him. The crowd began to disperse, but several people stopped to offer quiet words of support to Susannah. Molly O'Brien squeezed her hand. Mrs. Reyes nodded from across the street. Even Deputy Tucker gave Caleb a barely perceptible thumbs up before walking away. When they were finally alone, Susannah turned to Caleb with exhaustion and gratitude mingled in her eyes. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." "I know, but you stood up for me, in front of everyone." Her voice caught. "Nobody's done that since James died." "Then the people in this town have been failing you. That changes now." She looked at him, really looked at him, and something passed between them that neither of them was ready to name. "Come to my shop," she said quietly. "I've got coffee, and I think we need to plan our next move." They sat at her kitchen table, cups of coffee cooling between them while the evening light faded outside. "The auditor's our best chance," Caleb said. "If we can present enough evidence of Lloyd's fraud, he'll have to investigate. And if Lloyd finds out what we're doing before the auditor arrives, he already knows we're fighting back. The question is whether we can gather enough evidence to make it stick before he finds a way to stop us." Susannah wrapped her hands around her cup. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you doing this? You could have stayed quiet, kept working at Hiram's, saved enough money to move on to somewhere easier. Instead, you're painting a target on your back for a woman you barely know." Caleb was quiet for a moment. 4 years ago, I woke up in a hospital bed and found out I'd lost my legs. For months afterward, I thought my life was over. Thought I'd never work again, never be useful, never matter to anyone. He looked at his hands at the calluses earned from years of labor. Then I realized something. My legs were gone, but I was still here. My mind worked. My hands worked. My heart worked. The only thing that had changed was how other people saw me, and I could either let that define me, or I could prove them wrong. He met Susannah's eyes. "You know what that feels like. You lost your husband, and everyone expected you to fail. They expected you to need saving. Instead, you built something. You made yourself matter on your own terms. And Lloyd wants to take that away. Lloyd wants to take everything from everyone who won't bow to him. He's a bully who's gotten away with it because people were too scared or too tired to fight back." Caleb's voice hardened. "I'm not scared, and I'm not tired, and I'm not going to let him win." Susannah reached across the table and took his hand. "Neither am I." They sat there as the light faded, two people who'd been counted out by the world, finding strength in each other. And for the first time since Miranda Ashworth had called him broken, Caleb Wade felt whole. The days that followed were tense as a coiled rattlesnake. Caleb and Susannah worked separately during the day, she at her laundry, he at Hiram's smithy, but they met every evening to compare notes, gather evidence, and plan for the auditor's arrival. Mrs. Reyes provided meals and watchful eyes. Hiram kept his ear to the ground at the smithy. Deputy Tucker passed along whatever information he could without arousing suspicion. Lloyd Kincaid had gone quiet, and that worried Caleb more than open hostility. "He's planning something," Caleb said one evening at Susannah's kitchen table. "A man like Lloyd doesn't back down. He waits, watches, and strikes when you're not expecting it." "So what do? We stay vigilant. We don't go anywhere alone. And we get that evidence to the auditor the moment he arrives." Susannah nodded, but fear flickered in her eyes. "Caleb, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. But if it does," she leaned forward, "promise me you'll keep fighting. Promise me you won't let Lloyd win just because I'm not here to see it. Susannah, promise me." He took her hand. "I promise. But nothing's going to happen to you. I won't let it. She squeezed his fingers. You can't be everywhere at once. Then I'll be wherever you are. The words hung between them heavier than he'd intended. Susannah looked at him with something in her eyes that made his chest tight. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care so much about what happens to me? You know why. I want to hear you say it. Caleb took a breath. 4 years of protecting himself, of keeping people at a distance, of convincing himself he didn't need anyone. All of it dissolved in the face of this woman's steady gaze. Because you saw me, he said. Not the chair, not the disability. Me. You gave me work because I could do it, not because you pitied me. You treated me like a person, when half this town treated me like a problem. He paused. And because somewhere along the way, I started caring about your life more than my own. Susannah's eyes glistened. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I care about you too. Her voice was barely above a whisper. More than I thought I could care about anyone after James died. More than I thought I had left in me. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Susannah stood, crossed to his chair, and knelt beside him. Whatever happens, she said, I'm glad you came to Dusty Creek. I'm glad that woman at the station was too blind to see what she was throwing away, because if she hadn't rejected you, I never would have found you. She kissed him, soft, tentative, then deeper when he responded. When they finally pulled apart, Caleb's heart was pounding. Well, he said, his voice rough, that changes things. Does it? Yeah. Now I've got even more reason to make sure Lloyd Kincaid doesn't win. Susannah laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. The next morning, everything changed. Caleb was at Hiram's smithy, working on a broken pump mechanism, when Miguel came running through the door. Caleb, fire Susannah's shop. There's fire. He didn't remember wheeling through the streets, didn't remember the people jumping out of his way or the shouts that followed him. All he knew was the smoke rising above 4th Street and the terror clawing at his chest. By the time he arrived, flames were shooting from the back of the building. A crowd had gathered, but nobody was doing anything, just standing there watching Susannah's life burn. Where is she? Caleb grabbed the nearest man. Where's Susannah? Inside. She went back in for her sewing machine. That thing's worth a fortune to her. But the fire? Caleb didn't hear the rest. He was already wheeling toward the building. Wade, don't. Hiram appeared beside him, grabbing his chair. The whole back of that building is engulfed. You can't. I'm not leaving her in there. Then neither am I. Hiram released the chair. But we do this smart. The front's still clear. We go in through the front, find her, get out. 60 seconds, no more. They moved together. Hiram kicking in the front door, Caleb wheeling through the smoke-filled entrance. The heat was intense, the air thick and toxic, but Caleb could hear coughing from somewhere deeper in the building. Susannah. Caleb. Her voice was weak, coming from the direction of the back room. Caleb, I can't, the beam came down, I'm trapped. He found her near the back wall, pinned under a fallen support beam. The flames were getting closer, creeping along the floor toward them. Hiram, over here. The blacksmith appeared through the smoke, took one look at the situation, and grabbed the beam. On 3. 1, 2, 3. He lifted, while Caleb pulled Susannah free. Her leg was injured, she couldn't put weight on it, but she was alive. Can you carry her? Caleb asked. I've got her. Go. They made it out with seconds to spare. The back wall collapsed just as they cleared the front door, sending a shower of sparks and debris into the morning air. Caleb sat in the street, coughing, his lungs burning, but all he could think about was Susannah in Hiram's arms. Susannah alive. Susannah looking at him with tears streaming down her soot-covered face. You came, she whispered as Hiram set her down beside Caleb's chair. You came for me. I told you, I'll always come for you. The fire brigade arrived too late to save the building. They managed to prevent the flames from spreading to neighboring structures. But Susannah's shop, her livelihood, her home. Everything she'd built since James died was gone. She sat beside Caleb in the street, watching it burn, her face blank with shock. "It's gone," she said. "Everything's gone. We'll rebuild. With what I had, everything in that building. My savings, my equipment, my inventory. It's all ash now. We'll find a way." "You don't understand," her voice cracked. "This was Lloyd. This was his answer to us standing up to him. And he won, Caleb. He won." "He hasn't won anything. Not yet." A voice cut through the crowd. "Quite a tragedy." Lloyd Kincaid stood at the edge of the gathered townspeople, his face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. Carson Reed stood behind him, arms crossed, a smirk playing at his lips. "Such a terrible accident," Lloyd continued. "These old buildings, they're fire hazards. One spark and—" He spread his hands. "I suppose Mrs. Cole will have to consider my offer to buy the property now. At a reduced price, of course, given the damage." Caleb felt rage building in his chest like a second fire. "You did this." "Excuse me?" "You burned her out. Just like you threatened. Just like you've been planning all along." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Wade, and one you can't prove." "Can't I?" Caleb looked at Carson Reed. "Your man was in town last night. Same man who painted that word on Susannah's window. Same man who does all your dirty work. Carson was at Mrs. Ashworth's ranch last night. She'll confirm it. I'm sure she will. Just like she's confirmed every other lie you've told." Lloyd's expression hardened. "Be careful, cripple. You're accusing a respected businessman of arson. Without evidence, that's slander, and slander has consequences. So does arson. Prove it." Lloyd stepped closer. "You've been gathering evidence against me for weeks. I know all about your little scheme, but here's the thing. You've got nothing. A few complaints from people who owe me money. A few receipts that don't match up perfectly. That's not evidence. That's desperation. We'll let the auditor decide." "Ah, yes, the auditor." Lloyd smiled. "Harrison, I believe. He arrives next week. I'm looking forward to meeting him. In fact, I've already written to him. Told him about the troublemaker in town who's been harassing honest businessmen with false accusations." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You warned him about me." "I simply provided context. A cripple with a grudge, bitter about being rejected, taking out his frustrations on the pillars of the community." Lloyd shook his head sadly. "The auditor will understand. These things happen in frontier towns." That's enough." Susannah's voice cut through Caleb's rage. She was standing now, leaning on Hiram for support, her injured leg barely holding her weight. "Lloyd Kincaid, you've taken everything from me. My shop, my home, my livelihood. But you haven't taken my voice. Susannah, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. For the first time in 3 years, I'm being completely reasonable." She looked around at the gathered crowd. "You all know what Lloyd is. You've all seen how he operates. He's cheated every one of you at some point. He's held your debts over your heads, threatened your families, destroyed anyone who dared to stand up to him." People shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. "I know you're scared. I've been scared too. But look at what fear gets us." She gestured at the smoking ruins of her shop. "He burned me out because I wouldn't be afraid anymore. He'll do the same to any of you if you step out of line." "Now see here," Lloyd started. "Shut up." Susannah's voice cracked like a whip. "For once in your miserable life, shut up and let someone else talk." Lloyd's face went purple, but he fell silent. "This man came to Dusty Creek a month ago." Susannah pointed at Caleb. "Miranda Ashworth rejected him at the train station. Called him broken, useless, incomplete. Most people would have gotten back on that train and left." She looked at Caleb with something fierce in her eyes. He stayed. He found work. He made himself useful to this community despite everyone telling him he couldn't. And when Lloyd Kincaid came after me with his lies and his threats, Caleb Wade was the only one brave enough to stand beside me. Susannah, Caleb started. I'm not finished. She turned back to the crowd. I'm asking you to be brave too. I'm asking you to stand up and say what you know about Lloyd Kincaid. Not for me, for yourselves, for your families, for this town. Silence stretched across the gathered crowd. Caleb could see the fear in their faces, the calculation, the weighing of risks against rewards. Then Mrs. Reyes stepped forward. I have records, she said, her voice clear and strong. 3 years of records showing how Lloyd Kincaid has cheated his customers, overcharging short waits, false accounts. I will testify to all of it. Lloyd's face went from purple to white. Hiram Stone moved to stand beside Mrs. Reyes. So will I. Got receipts going back 5 years. Lloyd's been stealing from this town for a decade. Now wait just a minute. I'll testify too. Molly O'Brien pushed through the crowd, her face pale but determined. Lloyd holds my father's debt. He's threatened to take our farm if we don't pay interest we never agreed to. I've seen him forge signatures. I'll tell the auditor everything. One by one, others stepped forward. A rancher whose cattle had been undervalued at Lloyd's scales. A widow whose husband's debt had mysteriously doubled after his death. A shopkeeper who'd been driven out of business by Lloyd's predatory pricing. By the time they finished, there were a dozen people standing with Caleb and Susannah, and Lloyd Kincaid looked like a man watching his empire crumble. This is ridiculous, he sputtered. These are lies, all of you lying to protect a cripple and his whore. That's enough, Mr. Kincaid. Deputy Tucker stepped forward, his hand resting on his gun belt. What do you think you're doing, Tucker? My job. For the first time in too long, I'm doing my job. Tucker took a breath. Lloyd Kincaid, I'm placing you under arrest on suspicion of arson and fraud. You'll be held until the territorial auditor arrives to review the evidence. You can't do this, Sheriff Morrison. Sheriff Morrison resigned this morning, found out his debts to you were being used as leverage to keep him quiet. Tucker pulled out a pair of handcuffs. I'm acting sheriff now, and I'm cleaning up this town. Lloyd's face contorted with rage. Carson. But when he turned, Carson Reed was gone. The ranch hand had slipped away sometime during the confrontation, leaving his employer to face the consequences alone. Smart man, Tucker said. Knows when to cut his losses. You should have learned that lesson years ago, Lloyd. As Tucker led Lloyd away, the crowd began to disperse. Some people offered quiet words of support to Susannah. Others avoided eye contact, ashamed of their years of silence. But the tide had turned, and everyone knew it. Caleb wheeled over to where Susannah was leaning against a hitching post, her weight on her good leg. You did it, he said. We did it. She reached out and took his hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you. What now? Susannah looked at the smoking ruins of her shop, then back at Caleb. Now we rebuild. The next few days were a blur of activity. Caleb barely slept, spending his waking hours helping to organize the cleanup, coordinating with Deputy Tucker, and preparing testimony for the auditor's arrival. Susannah moved into Mrs. Reyes's boarding house temporarily. Her leg was healing. Dr. Martinez said it was just a bad sprain, nothing broken, but she couldn't stand for long periods yet. I feel useless, she said one evening as Caleb sat with her in the boarding house parlor. Everyone's working to help me, and I can't do anything but sit here. You're healing. That's not useless. It feels useless. Caleb smiled. Now you know how I felt for the first 6 months after the mine collapse. Couldn't do anything but lie in a hospital bed and watch other people live their lives. How did you get through it? Stubbornness mostly. And eventually the realization that there were still things I could do. Different things maybe, but not nothing. Susannah was quiet for a moment. Do you ever miss it? Walking, I mean. Sometimes, not as much as I thought I would. He looked down at his chair. This is my life now. I've made peace with it, mostly. What's the part you haven't made peace with? Caleb hesitated. This wasn't something he talked about. Not with anyone. The loneliness, he said finally. The way people look at me and see the chair first. The relationships that ended because people couldn't handle it. Sarah. He stopped. Who's Sarah? Someone I was going to marry, before the accident. She visited me once in the hospital and never came back. He forced the words out past the old pain. I don't blame her. It was too much too fast. But it made me careful about getting close to anyone again. Susannah reached out and touched his face, turning it toward her. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I see the chair, Caleb, but I see you more. And what I see is the bravest, most stubborn, most infuriatingly wonderful man I've ever met. Infuriatingly wonderful. You have your moments. He laughed and she kissed him, and for a few minutes the weight of everything they were facing lifted just enough to let them breathe. The auditor arrived 3 days later. Harrison was a thin, precise man with spectacles and a reputation for thoroughness. He set up in the sheriff's office and spent 2 full days reviewing evidence, the records Mrs. Reyes had provided, the receipts from Hiram, the sworn statements from a dozen townspeople. On the 3rd day, he called a public meeting. The church was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, spilling out onto the street. Caleb wheeled in beside Susannah, who was walking with a cane now, and found a spot near the front. Lloyd Kincaid sat in the first row, flanked by 2 territorial marshals. He looked diminished, somehow smaller than he'd seemed when he was terrorizing the town. I've reviewed the evidence, Harrison began, his voice carrying through the silent church. What I've found is a pattern of fraud, extortion, and criminal conspiracy spanning nearly a decade. Lloyd shifted in his seat. Mr. Kincaid systematically cheated the citizens of Dusty Creek through falsified weights and measures, predatory lending practices, and the creation of fraudulent debt records. He used his position as the primary supplier to create dependency, then exploited that dependency for personal gain. Harrison looked directly at Lloyd. Additionally, there is substantial evidence linking Mr. Kincaid to the arson that destroyed Mrs. Cole's property last week. While the primary perpetrator, Mr. Carson Reed, has fled the territory, witnesses place him at Mr. Kincaid's establishment immediately before the fire, and a partially burned kerosene container found at the scene bears Mr. Kincaid's store inventory mark. Lloyd's face had gone ashen. It is my recommendation that Mr. Lloyd Kincaid be transported to the territorial capital for trial on charges of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit arson. His assets will be frozen pending the outcome of that trial, and any debts owed to him by citizens of Dusty Creek will be reviewed for legitimacy. The church erupted in applause. People who'd been afraid to speak for years suddenly found their voices shouting approval, celebrating the end of Lloyd's reign. Caleb felt Susannah's hand find his. It's over, she whispered, but it wasn't. Not quite. One more matter, Harrison called out, and the noise subsided. I've also received testimony regarding the conduct of Mrs. Miranda Ashworth. The church went silent. Evidence suggests that Mrs. Ashworth's ranch hand, Carson Reed, acted not only on Mr. Kincaid's orders, but on hers as well. The vandalism of Mrs. Cole's property, the intimidation of witnesses, and potentially the arson itself may have been conducted with Mrs. Ashworth's knowledge and consent. All eyes turned to the back of the church, where Miranda Ashworth sat alone, her face carefully blank. Mrs. Ashworth, Harrison continued, you are not currently under arrest. However, I strongly recommend that you cooperate fully with the ongoing investigation. Any evidence of your involvement in these crimes will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Miranda stood. For a moment, Caleb thought she might try to defend herself, might offer some excuse or denial. Instead, she looked directly at him. I was wrong about you, Mr. Wade, she said, her voice carrying through the silent church. I looked at your chair and saw limitation. I should have looked at your character and seen strength. She turned and walked out of the church without another word. The meeting dissolved into celebration after that. People surrounded Caleb and Susannah, offering congratulations, apologies for their earlier silence, promises to help rebuild. Hiram Stone gripped Caleb's hand hard enough to hurt. "You did good, Wade. Real good." Mrs. Reyes hugged Susannah, then surprised Caleb by hugging him too. "I knew," she said. "The day you arrived, I knew you were different. You proved me right." Deputy Tucker. Sheriff Tucker, now officially appointed by the territorial authority, shook Caleb's hand and grinned. "Couldn't have done this without you. Dusty Creek owes you a debt it can't repay." "I don't want payment," Caleb said. "I just want a chance to build a life here. That's all I ever wanted." As the crowd began to thin, Caleb found Susannah standing at the church door, looking out at the town that had finally found its courage. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about rebuilding. About the future. About—" She paused. "About what comes next for us. What do you want to come next?" She turned to look at him, and her eyes held no hesitation. "I want to build something real. With you. If you want that too." Caleb reached up and took her hand. "I've wanted that since the first day you looked at me and saw a person instead of a chair." She smiled, and it was like the sun coming up. "Then let's build it together." The rebuilding started the very next day. Caleb had expected to do most of the work himself, maybe with Hiram's help. What he hadn't expected was half the town showing up at dawn with lumber tools and willing hands. "What's all this?" he asked as wagons pulled up to the burned lot. "This is Dusty Creek making amends," Hiram said, dropping a load of planks onto the ground. "Lot of people in this town stood by while Lloyd Kincaid terrorized good folks. They can't undo that, but they can help build something new." Mrs. Reyes arrived with enough food to feed an army. Molly O'Brien brought her father and 2 brothers, all of them ready to work. Even Dr. Martinez showed up with a medical kit insisting someone was bound to hammer a thumb. "You don't have to do this," Susannah said, overwhelmed. "We want to," Molly replied. "You stood up for all of us. Now we stand up for you." Caleb threw himself into the work. He couldn't do the heavy lifting, couldn't climb ladders, or work on the roof, but he could design measure-cut precise angles and direct the construction. His limitations didn't make him useless. They just meant he contributed differently. By midday, the foundation of the new building was already taking shape. "You're good at this," Susannah said, watching him sketch modifications to the original floor plan. "The way you see how things fit together." "Had a lot of practice. When you can't do things the usual way, you learn to think around problems." "That's not just about the chair, is it?" Caleb looked up at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean you think differently about everything. Problems, people, life. You don't take anything for granted." She sat down beside him on the makeshift workbench. "Most people look at a broken thing and see junk. You look at it and see possibilities." "Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact. One of the many reasons I—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "One of the many reasons you what?" She met his eyes, and something passed between them that made Caleb's heart beat faster. "One of the many reasons I love you." The words hung in the air, fragile and powerful. "Susannah." "You don't have to say it back. I just wanted you to know. After everything that's happened, after nearly losing you in that fire, I promised myself I wouldn't waste any more time being afraid." Caleb reached out and took her hand. "I love you too. Have for weeks now. Was just too scared to say it." "You scared?" She laughed. "You ran into a burning building for me. That was easy. This is hard." He squeezed her fingers. "Loving someone, letting them in, risking getting hurt again. That's the scariest thing I've ever done. Then we'll be scared together." Someone cleared their throat behind them. Hiram stood there trying to hide a smile. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got a question about the roof pitch. Wade, you want to take a look?" Caleb reluctantly released Susannah's hand. "Coming." As he wheeled away, he heard Susannah laugh softly. The sound followed him like music. The work continued for 2 weeks. Slowly, the skeleton of the new building rose from the ashes of the old one. It was bigger than the original, with a reinforced structure and better fire prevention measures. Caleb had designed separate areas for the laundry and the dressmaking, with a small apartment in the back where Susannah could live. "It's beautiful," she said one evening, standing in the half-finished front room. "Better than what I had before. Stronger too, won't burn down so easy." "Nothing about this is easy." She turned to face him. "But nothing good ever is." On the 15th day, something unexpected happened. Caleb was working on the door hinges when a wagon pulled up outside. He looked up and felt his whole body go rigid. Miranda Ashworth climbed down from the driver's seat. She looked different than she had at the train station. The rigid confidence was gone, replaced by something more uncertain. She walked toward Caleb with her hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Wade?" "Mrs. Ashworth." Silence stretched between them. The sounds of construction had stopped as workers noticed who had arrived. "I came to apologize," Miranda said. "Properly this time. What I said in the church, it wasn't enough." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything." Her voice cracked. "I looked at you that day at the station, and I saw my own fears staring back at me. A ranch I couldn't run alone, a future I couldn't face without help. I wanted a solution, not a person. And when you didn't fit my narrow idea of what that solution should look like, I threw you away." "Mrs. Ashworth, let me finish, please." She took a breath. "I've been running scared for 2 years. Since my husband died, I've made one bad decision after another trying to hold on to something that was slipping through my fingers. I hired Carson Reed because he was mean enough to protect me. I aligned myself with Lloyd Kincaid because he was powerful enough to help me. I told myself the ends justified the means." She looked at the half-built structure behind Caleb. "But the ends just kept getting worse. And now Carson's gone, Lloyd's in prison, and I'm alone with a ranch I still can't run and a reputation I've destroyed. What do you want from me?" "Nothing." Miranda shook her head. "I don't deserve anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I was wrong. Not just about your chair, about everything. The way you've built a life here, the way you've helped Susannah, the way you've stood up for what's right. That's more than most able-bodied men could do. That's more than I've ever done." Caleb studied her face. He saw genuine regret there, genuine shame. But he also saw something else: desperation. "Your ranch is failing," he said. Miranda flinched. "How did you—" "I've been paying attention, heard things around town. You've lost hands since Carson left. Equipment breaking down. Cattle wandering off because you don't have enough people to ride fence." "It's worse than that." Her voice dropped. "I'm going to lose everything by winter if something doesn't change." Susannah appeared at Caleb's side. "What's going on?" "Mrs. Ashworth was just apologizing," Caleb said, "and telling me she's about to lose her ranch." Susannah's expression hardened. "After everything she's done—" "I know what I've done." Miranda's voice was quiet. "I know I don't deserve help. I just wanted to make amends while I still could." She turned to go, but Caleb's voice stopped her. "Wait." Miranda paused. "I'm not going to work for you, not after what happened, but I know someone who might be able to help." "Who?" "Hiram Stone's got connections with ranchers all over the territory. Good men looking for work. If you're willing to pay fair wages and treat people decent, he might be able to send some your way." Miranda stared at him. "After everything I did to you, you'd help me." "I'm not helping you. I'm helping your hands who need jobs, your cattle who need care, and the people in this town who depend on your ranch." Caleb wheeled closer. "But I'm also showing you something about who I am. You called me broken. You said I wasn't whole. I'm proving that a man's worth isn't in his legs. It's in how he treats people, even people who've hurt him." Miranda's eyes glistened. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do better. Mean it this time." She nodded slowly. "I will. I promise I will." After she left, Susannah turned to Caleb with something like wonder in her expression. You just helped the woman who rejected you, humiliated you, and nearly destroyed everything we built. I didn't help her. I showed her what grace looks like. He took Susannah's hand. Someone once told me that rejection isn't the end of the story. I'm proving them right. Who told you that? You did. The first night we ate dinner together. Susannah smiled. I'm smart sometimes. You're smart all the time. It's one of the many reasons I love you. She leaned down and kissed him right there in front of God and the whole construction crew. Someone whistled. Someone else applauded. Hiram's voice boomed out. All right, show's over, back to work. But Caleb didn't care. He'd faced rejection, humiliation, and fire. He'd found love, community, and purpose. And he wasn't letting go of any of it. The building was finished on a sweltering August afternoon. Everyone who'd helped build it gathered for the celebration. Mrs. Reyes had organized food from half the kitchens in town. Someone brought a fiddle. Another brought a guitar. Before long, there was music and dancing, and more joy than Dusty Creek had seen in years. Susannah stood in the doorway of her new shop, her eyes bright with tears she refused to shed. It's perfect, she whispered to Caleb. It's absolutely perfect. You deserve it. We deserve it, she corrected him. None of this would exist without you. None of it would matter without you. She laughed. We're both getting sentimental in our old age. Speak for yourself. I'm just the right amount of sentimental. The celebration went on until well past dark. Caleb watched from a comfortable spot near the entrance content to observe rather than participate. He'd never been much for crowds, and his chair made dancing difficult anyway. But then Susannah appeared in front of him, her hand extended. Dance with me. I can't. Yes, you can. Different from how most people do it, maybe. But you can. She smiled. Trust me. He took her hand and let her pull him into the cleared space where others were dancing. She positioned herself in front of his chair, took both his hands, and began to move. It wasn't like dancing he'd done before the accident, but it was something. Movement and music and connection, the two of them finding a rhythm that was theirs alone. See, Susannah said. Not so hard. You make everything look easy. That's because I have a good partner. They danced until the music stopped and the crowd began to thin. Then they sat together on the new porch, watching the stars appear over Dusty Creek. I want to ask you something, Caleb said. Ask. When this all started, when you gave me that first job fixing your sewing machine, what made you do it? Susannah was quiet for a moment. Honestly. Because you reminded me of myself. Someone everyone had written off. Someone fighting to prove they were worth more than people thought. She turned to look at him. I saw you at that train station, watched Miranda walk away from you, and I thought, there goes a man who knows what it's like to be judged before you have a chance to prove yourself. So you gave me a chance. I gave us both a chance. And look what we built. A shop. A life. A future. Something real. She took his hand. Caleb, I spent 3 years after James died telling myself I didn't need anyone, that I was better off alone, that depending on someone would only get me hurt. Then you showed up and proved me wrong. I proved you wrong. You showed me that needing someone doesn't make you weak, it makes you human, and that finding the right person to need, that's the greatest gift there is. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been locked away since the mine collapse, since Sarah left, since 3 years of rejection and isolation. Susannah, let me finish. I'm not asking you for anything tonight. I'm just telling you how I feel. You've given me hope again. You've given me faith in people again. You've given me a reason to believe that the future might be better than the past. She squeezed his hand. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. You've already changed my life, Caleb Wade. You already made everything different. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. You changed mine, too, he said. More than you know. They sat there until the last guest left, and the stars wheeled overhead, and the new building stood strong and solid behind them, proof that broken things could be made whole again. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Caleb was organizing tools in the small workshop space Susannah had given him when Sheriff Tucker appeared in the doorway. "Morning, Wade. Got some news." "Good news or bad news?" "Interesting news." Tucker took off his hat. "Lloyd Kincaid's trial is scheduled for next month in Phoenix. The territorial prosecutor thinks they've got enough to put him away for 10 years, maybe more." "That's good to hear." "There's more. Carson Reed was picked up in Tucson 2 days ago. He's agreed to testify against Lloyd in exchange for a reduced sentence. Says he can prove Miranda Ashworth knew about the arson before it happened." Caleb felt his stomach tighten. What does that mean for her? Means she might be facing charges too. Conspiracy at minimum. Could lose the ranch, could serve time. Tucker studied Caleb's face. "Thought you'd want to know, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering you just helped her find workers. Considering you seem to have a soft spot for people who don't deserve it." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "What she did to me at the train station, that was cruel. What she did with Lloyd, that was criminal. But there's a difference between someone who's evil and someone who made bad choices out of fear." "You think she deserves mercy?" "I think everyone deserves a chance to make things right. Whether they take that chance is up to them." Tucker nodded slowly. "You're a better man than most, Wade. Most people in your position would want to see her burn." "I've seen enough burning. I'd rather see people rebuild." Later that day, Caleb told Susannah about the news. "Carson's testifying against Lloyd," he said, "and possibly against Miranda." Susannah's expression was complicated. "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted. Miranda hurt me badly that day at the station. But I've seen her face since then. I've seen the fear and the regret. I don't think she's a bad person. I think she's a scared person who made bad choices. That doesn't excuse what she did." "No, it doesn't. But it might explain it." He took Susannah's hand. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about finding the right person to need, about believing in the future. I want to believe that people can change. I want to believe that the worst moment of someone's life doesn't have to define them forever. Because you don't want to be defined by your worst moment. Because I don't want to be defined by anyone else's judgment of me. And if that's true for me, it has to be true for everyone else too. Even Miranda Ashworth." Susannah studied his face for a long moment. Then she kissed him soft and sweet. "You're remarkable," she said. "You know that." "I'm stubborn. There's a difference." "Maybe. But I love you anyway." "Even the stubborn parts." "Especially the stubborn parts." 3 days later, Miranda Ashworth was arrested. The news hit Dusty Creek like a thunderclap. The most powerful rancher in the territory led away in handcuffs, her ranch seized, pending investigation. It was the end of an era. Caleb heard about it from Mrs. Reyes, who heard it from Dr. Martinez, who heard it from the telegram operator. "They took her this morning," Mrs. Reyes said. "She'll be held in Phoenix until the trial." "What happens to the ranch?" "Territorial authority will run it until things are sorted out. Workers will stay, cattle will be cared for. But if she's convicted, it'll probably be sold." Caleb sat with that information for a long time. He'd come to Dusty Creek expecting to marry Miranda Ashworth, to help run her ranch, to build a life with her. Instead, she'd rejected him. Publicly humiliated him, aligned herself with a criminal, and now she was facing prison. The universe had strange ideas about justice. But the universe had also given him Susannah, had given him friends' work purpose, had given him everything Miranda had promised, and more. Maybe rejection wasn't punishment. Maybe it was redirection. That evening, Caleb wheeled to Susannah's shop and found her closing up for the night. "I heard about Miranda," she said. "Everyone's heard." "How are you feeling?" "I don't know." He rolled inside and stopped near the counter. "Part of me thinks she deserves it. Part of me thinks nobody deserves to lose everything. And part of me is just grateful I'm here instead of at a ranch caught up in all that mess. You could have been. I almost was. If she'd looked past the chair, if she'd given me a chance that day at the station, I'd be standing next to her right now, watching everything burn. He paused. Instead, I'm standing next to you watching something new grow. You're not standing. Susannah pointed out with a gentle smile. Figure of speech. She came around the counter and sat on his lap, something she'd started doing recently, a casual intimacy that still surprised him every time. Caleb Wade, she said, looking into his eyes. I love you. I want to spend my life with you. And I don't care if you're sitting, standing, or hanging upside down from a chandelier, you're the man I choose. Is that a proposal? That's a statement of fact. The proposal comes later when I've got a ring and a proper speech planned. You're planning to propose to me. Why shouldn't I? You're clearly not going to do it yourself. Caleb laughed. You don't know that. I know you're cautious. I know you've been hurt before. I know you're probably still convincing yourself that someone could actually want to marry the man in the wheelchair. She touched his face. But I'm not waiting for you to figure it out. I know what I want. And what do you want? You. All of you. Forever. He pulled her close and kissed her with everything he had. When they finally broke apart, he was breathing hard and his heart was pounding. Yes, he said. Yes, what? Yes, I'll marry you. Whenever you ask, however you ask, the answer is yes. It will always be yes. Susannah's face split into the widest smile he'd ever seen. You stole my proposal moment. You can still give the speech. I'll act surprised. She laughed and kissed him again, and Caleb Wade knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Caleb's life. Susannah's business reopened to more customers than she'd ever had before. Word had spread through the territory about the woman who'd stood up to Lloyd Kincaid, and people came from towns 50 miles away just to buy a dress or have their laundry done by her. Caleb's workshop stayed busy too. Ranchers, miners, and farmers brought him equipment that nobody else could fix. His reputation grew alongside Susannah's, and before long, they had more work than they could handle. We need to hire help, Susannah said one evening as they ate supper together. I can't keep up with the orders anymore. Same here. Got 3 pump repairs waiting and a wagon brake that's been sitting for a week. So we hire people, train them, build something bigger. Caleb smiled. Listen to you talking like a businesswoman. I am a businesswoman, always have been. Just didn't have a partner who believed in me before. You've always had a partner. You just didn't know it yet. She threw a napkin at him. You're impossible. And you're marrying me anyway. Don't remind me. But she was smiling when she said it, and Caleb's heart felt fuller than it had any right to feel. The trial of Lloyd Kincaid took place in Phoenix on a blazing hot September morning. Caleb and Susannah made the journey together, traveling by wagon since the train didn't run that route. It took 3 days, and by the time they arrived, Caleb's arms ached from managing his chair over rough roads. You didn't have to come, Susannah said as they checked into a modest hotel near the courthouse. Yes, I did. This is how our story ends. I want to see it through. The courtroom was packed. Lloyd Kincaid sat at the defense table, looking diminished in his prison clothes. His lawyer whispered in his ear, but Lloyd's eyes kept scanning the crowd, looking for allies he wouldn't find. Carson Reed testified first. His voice was flat mechanical as he described every crime Lloyd had ordered him to commit. The vandalism, the intimidation, the arson. And Mrs. Cole's shop, the prosecutor asked. Who ordered that fire? Lloyd Kincaid. He paid me $50 to burn it down while she was inside. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Susannah's hand found Caleb's and squeezed hard. While she was inside, the prosecutor repeated. You're saying the intent was to kill Mrs. Cole. Lloyd didn't care if she lived or died. He just wanted her gone. Caleb felt rage building in his chest. He'd known Lloyd was dangerous, but hearing it spelled out so coldly, the casual disregard for human life made his blood run hot. Mrs. Reyes testified next, presenting her meticulous records of Lloyd's fraudulent business practices. Then Hiram Stone. Then Molly O'Brien. One by one, the people of Dusty Creek told their stories, painting a picture of a man who'd terrorized an entire community for a decade. When it was Susannah's turn, she walked to the witness stand with her head held high. "Mrs. Cole," the prosecutor said, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Lloyd Kincaid has been harassing me for 3 years. He wanted to buy my business. When I refused, he spread rumors about my character. When that didn't work, he tried to forge debt records to steal my property. When that failed, he burned my shop to the ground." "And you were inside when the fire started." "I went back in to save my sewing machine. It was all I had left from my husband." Her voice caught. "Mr. Wade pulled me out. If he hadn't come when he did, I would have died." The prosecutor turned to the jury. No further questions. Lloyd's lawyer tried to discredit the witnesses, suggesting they were all conspiring against an innocent businessman. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged receipts, the altered scales, the pattern of exploitation going back years. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "Guilty," the foreman announced. "On all counts." Lloyd Kincaid was sentenced to 15 years in the territorial prison. As the guards led him away, he turned and looked at Caleb with pure hatred in his eyes. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You think you've won, but you haven't. My friends will find you. They'll finish what I started." Caleb met his gaze without flinching. "You don't have any friends, Lloyd. You never did. You just had people who were afraid of you. And now they're not afraid anymore." Lloyd was dragged away, still screaming threats that echoed off the courtroom walls. Outside, Susannah collapsed against Caleb's chest, trembling. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." "Almost over," he said. "There's still one more thing we need to do." "What's that?" "Get married." She laughed through her tears. "You're proposing now, in front of the courthouse." "You already proposed, remember. I'm just reminding you that you owe me a wedding." "I don't owe you anything." "You owe me a lifetime, and I intend to collect." The wedding took place 2 weeks later on the first day of October. They held it in front of Susannah's shop, the building they'd rebuilt together from ashes. Hiram Stone had built an archway decorated with wildflowers. Mrs. Reyes had cooked enough food for the entire town. Even Deputy Sheriff Tucker now had arranged for his deputies to handle security, though Caleb suspected he just wanted an excuse to attend. The whole town came. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, farmers. People who'd once looked at Caleb's wheelchair with pity or contempt now shook his hand and wished him well. "You did something special here," one old rancher told him. "You showed us what it means to stand up when it counts. Folks won't forget that." "I didn't do it alone." "No, you didn't. And that's part of what makes it special." Susannah appeared at the back of the gathered crowd, and Caleb forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress she'd made herself, her dark hair pinned up with a spray of desert flowers. She wasn't trying to look beautiful. She just was. "You look," he started, but the words died in his throat. "I look like everything I ever wanted and never thought I'd have." She smiled, and it was like the sun rising. "You're getting sentimental again." "It's my wedding day. I'm allowed." The ceremony was short and simple. No priest, they'd agreed, that felt too formal for who they were. Just the territorial judge, who'd officiated at Lloyd's trial, now performing a happier duty. "Do you, Caleb Wade, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do." "And do you, Susannah Cole, take this man to be your husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Caleb pulled Susannah down for a kiss, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration went on for hours. There was dancing and music and more food than anyone could eat. Caleb watched from his spot near the archway, overwhelmed by how much his life had changed since that day at the train station. "You look happy," a voice said behind him. He turned and felt his heart stutter. Miranda Ashworth stood a few feet away, wearing a plain dress and looking nothing like the proud rancher who'd rejected him 4 months ago. "Mrs. Ashworth," he said carefully, "I didn't expect to see you here. I wasn't going to come. Figured I'd be about as welcome as a rattlesnake at a church picnic." She looked at the celebrating crowd. "But I needed to say something, and I figured today was my last chance." "What did you need to say?" Miranda took a deep breath. "The territorial prosecutor offered me a deal. I testify against some of Lloyd's associates who are still at large, and they reduce my sentence. I'm looking at 2 years instead of 10. "That's good, isn't it? It's better than I deserve." She met his eyes. "I came to thank you." "Thank me." "For what you said in the courtroom. When Lloyd was threatening you, you said he didn't have any friends, just people who were afraid of him." Miranda's voice dropped. "That hit me hard. Because I was one of those people. I aligned myself with him because I was terrified of losing everything, and instead, I nearly lost my soul. We all make mistakes. This was more than a mistake. I hurt people, hurt you, hurt Susannah, hurt this whole town by looking the other way while Lloyd did his damage." She looked at the ground. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he held out his hand. "That's all any of us can do," he said. "Try to be better tomorrow than we were today." Miranda stared at his hand like it might bite her. Then slowly she took it. "Thank you, Mr. Wade." "Caleb. If we're going to be neighbors for the next few decades, you might as well call me Caleb." Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Caleb, then, and congratulations. She's a lucky woman." "We're both lucky. That's the whole point." Miranda released his hand and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before anyone else noticed she'd been there. Susannah appeared at his side a moment later. "Was that who I think it was?" "Yeah." "What did she want?" "To apologize, to thank me, to try to make peace with what she's done." Susannah watched Miranda's retreating figure. "Do you believe her?" "I believe she's trying. Whether she succeeds," he shrugged, "that's up to her." "You're too forgiving." "Maybe, but holding on to anger is like carrying around a hot coal. The only person it burns is you." Susannah leaned down and kissed his forehead. "That's why I married you. You make me want to be better." "You were already pretty good. I just gave you an excuse to show it." The celebration continued until well past midnight. When the last guest finally left and the cleanup was done, Caleb and Susannah sat together on the porch of the small apartment behind her shop. Their apartment now. "So this is it," Susannah said. "We're married." "Seems that way." "Any regrets?" Caleb laughed. "About marrying the most stubborn, beautiful, infuriating woman in the Arizona Territory? Not a single one." "Good answer." She leaned against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Can I ask you something?" Susannah said. "Anything." "That day at the train station, when Miranda rejected you in front of everyone, what were you thinking?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, remembering the shame and the anger and the desperate determination. "I was thinking that I'd come too far to give up," he said finally. "That every door that closed in my face was just pushing me toward a door that would open. That somewhere in this town, there was something worth fighting for. Did you find it? I found you. I found friends. I found work that matters, and a community that accepts me." He took her hand. "I found everything I was looking for, just not where I expected to find it." "And the wheelchair? What about it? Do you still think about what might have been if the accident had never happened?" Caleb considered the question carefully. It was something he'd wrestled with for years, the ghost of the man he might have been, if those support beams hadn't collapsed. Sometimes, he admitted, but less than I used to. Because here's the thing, if the accident had never happened, I'd probably still be working in that mine. I'd have married Sarah and settled into a life that was comfortable but small. I never would have come to Dusty Creek. Never would have met you. So you're saying the worst thing that ever happened to you led to the best thing that ever happened to you? I'm saying that life doesn't always take you where you plan to go. Sometimes it takes you somewhere better. He lifted her hand to his lips. I wouldn't trade this for anything. Not even my legs. Susannah's eyes glistened in the starlight. I love you, Caleb Wade. I love you too, Susannah Wade, she laughed. That's going to take some getting used to. We've got time. The months that followed proved him right. Caleb expanded his workshop, hiring 2 apprentices who were eager to learn mechanical repair. Susannah took on help too. Molly O'Brien, whose family had finally paid off their debt to Lloyd's estate, came to work in the shop 3 days a week. The town of Dusty Creek grew and changed. New businesses opened where old ones had failed. People who'd left during Lloyd's reign returned drawn by stories of a community that had found its courage. Sheriff Tucker got married himself to the new schoolteacher who'd arrived from Boston. Hiram Stone retired from the smithy and handed the business over to his nephew. Mrs. Reyes finally smiled, not just the tight, guarded smile she'd shown the world, but a real one, warm and full. And every evening, Caleb and Susannah sat on their porch and watched the sun set over the desert, grateful for each other and the life they'd built. One evening in late spring, Susannah came home with news. I saw Dr. Martinez today, she said, sitting down across from Caleb with an expression he couldn't read. Are you sick? No. She took his hands. I'm pregnant. Caleb felt the world tilt sideways. We're going to have a baby. In about 7 months. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then the joy hit him like a wave, overwhelming and absolute. A baby, he whispered. Our baby. Are you happy? Happy. He pulled her onto his lap and held her tight. I'm terrified. I'm overwhelmed. I have no idea how to be a father. But yes, I'm happy. I'm the happiest I've ever been. Good. She kissed him. Because I'm terrified too. We can figure it out together. We'll figure everything out together. We always do. The baby came in December, a healthy girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. They named her Hope because that's what she represented, the future they'd built from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy them. Caleb held her for the first time in the small apartment behind the shop, his hands trembling with emotions he couldn't name. She's perfect, he said. She's loud. Susannah replied, exhausted but smiling. She's ours. Yeah. Susannah reached out and touched his face. She's ours. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Reyes poked her head in. Half the town is outside, she said. They want to see the baby. Tell them to come back tomorrow. I told them that. They brought gifts anyway. Mrs. Reyes smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. You did good, Caleb Wade. Built something real here, something that matters. After she left, Caleb sat with his wife and daughter, listening to the sounds of friends gathering outside, and felt a peace he'd never known was possible. 4 years ago, he'd lost his legs in a mine collapse and thought his life was over. 3 months ago, he'd stepped off a train in Dusty Creek and been rejected by the woman who was supposed to be his future. Now he held his daughter in his arms, his wife beside him, and a community around him that saw him for who he was, not what he couldn't do. Miranda Ashworth had called him broken, useless, less than whole. She'd been wrong. Caleb Wade wasn't defined by his wheelchair. He wasn't limited by his disability. He wasn't less than anyone. He was a husband, a father, a friend. He was a craftsman, a fighter, a survivor. He was a man who'd been knocked down by life and refused to stay down. And he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Susannah leaned against his shoulder, her eyes closing with exhaustion. "Worth it," she murmured. Caleb looked at his daughter, at his wife, at the life he'd built from nothing. "Every single moment," he said, because rejection wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning.